On Thanksgiving Day in 1916, Ruth and Bill Seaman were married at my mother's Aunt Nettie's home in Detroit. When Clayton was released from the Navy, he came home. We were then living in Spring Lake, and as he loved the ships and the water, he went to work on the lakes and was never a problem again. In 1916, his ship docked at Cleveland, and the Army recruiter was at the dock to enlist men because we were having trouble with Pancho Villa in Mexico. He joined and was down there when we got into the First World War. His company was not even mustered out. They sent him to Montgomery, Alabama, and after training there, went overseas to France. He was in the engineering corps. And in October of 1918, he was wounded while rescuing some of his buddies across the Elbe River, and was awarded the French Croix de Guerre. When the armistice was signed, he was in a hospital in England. His elbow had been broken, and in later years it gave him trouble quite often when the weather was bad. He was in the first boat load of wounded after the armistice. He got to New York just before Christmas. We at home knew nothing of this. We supposed he was still in France. The soldiers were told to report to their own state's headquarters for Christmas entertainment in New York. He went to Michigan headquarters and was given a box of homemade candy made and sent in by a Michigan girl with her name and address in it. It could have been from anywhere, but what a coincidence. It was from a girl living about 2 blocks from us. When he was released and came home, he went to see her, and they went around together a few times, but she told him she was too young for him. But she had a friend who worked in the drugstore office with her, who was just right for him. She introduced him to Laura Sage, and in 6 weeks they were married. And it lasted for more than 50 years. They never had any children. On August 31st, 1919, I married Elmer Woodard. On September 25th, 1920, we had a pair of twin boys, Robert Elmer and Russell Edward. Elmer was not a good provider, jumping from job to job. At last, I could take it no more, and we separated. By that time, the twins were a year old, and I was 5 months pregnant. On February 16th, 1922, we had a baby girl, and I named her Helen Jean. I had gone back to my folks by that time. They were wonderful to me and my children. 5 years later, I met and married Oswald Jones, June 15, 1927. James was born December 26, 1928. Gordon, March 28, 1930. Catherine Ann, June 16th, my birthday, in 1934, followed by Thomas, April 21st, 1936. All 5 of my sons were in the United States service, some wartimes and some peace. Russell enlisted in March of 1940 for Hawaiian service and was there when the Japs attacked. He was not hurt. Bob was in the National Guards when the war broke out, and they were all inducted into the regular army, and he saw service in New Guinea. He suffered brain concussion when a shell burst too close, and was hospitalized in Australia and at Letterman Hospital in San Francisco, and again in Kansas City. Finally getting home, he suffered from a nervous condition all the rest of his life. He married an 18-year-old girl named Mary Beebe, and they had a daughter who was blind and retarded. That marriage did not last. He married again and lived with Harriet until her death in 1975. Later, he was married to Helen Hines from Grand Haven. He suffered arthritis and other ills and then passed away with cancer at the age of 62, January 5th, 1983. But Jim joined the Marines in 1946 for a 2-year term. He was stationed at Quantico, Virginia. Gordon joined the Navy in 1948 after his graduation, and he served on an oil tanker in the Pacific. This was during the Korean conflict. Tom joined the Navy on September 4th, 1957, and after his training at Great Lakes, Illinois, was sent to Annapolis, Maryland, where he was a corpsman at the academy. In all, he served 5 years. Catherine and George Cummings had one son, Donald, and during the war he served in the naval aviation, down around the Philippines mostly. My 7 children and Don are the only grandchildren my parents had. At this time, when I am recording this, it is May and June of 1984. I have 26 grandchildren and 30 great-grandchildren. What a great bunch they are. I thank God for each one of them. After Oswald died from diabetes on September 27, 1965, I lived alone for 15 years. Then I had 2 bouts with major surgery, and as I was 84 years old, my family decided I could no longer keep house and cook and so forth for myself. So Helen put my name in the Michigan Christian Home. I was accepted, but had to wait until they could take me in. So Jim and Joan kindly took me in, and I was there 21 months until the home called me. I am very happy here and never sorry I came in. So glad Helen thought of it. When I was living alone, Don invited me to visit them in Santa Ana, California, and I went out there by bus alone twice. I'm so glad I went. I enjoy seeing the Western country and visiting with Don and Janie and Scott. They showed me a very good time. When Don was young, he graduated from University of Michigan. He is an electrical engineer. He worked for the government for a while, but now is retired. Of my children, Bob worked for the city of Grand Rapids as a dispatcher for the highway department. Russell and Gordon for the post office. Jim attended Kendall Art School and works in advertising. Tom graduated from University of Michigan and then Wayne State, where he earned his law degree. He and his family then moved back to Washington, D.C., where he worked for the Veterans Administration for about 10 years before being selected as an administrative law judge. They moved to California, where their house was burned to the ground during those awful fires in 1980. They then transferred to Grand Rapids. My daughter, Catherine, took nurses training at Mount Carmel Hospital in Detroit, married Bud Rogenbeck, and they have settled in Garden City, Michigan. Helen married Chi Emmert and has worked many years at Merchant Service Credit Bureau. Chi is retired from the C&O Railroad. Russell came home from the service and married Joanne Masselink after he had only known her for 11 days, but the marriage has lasted over 40 years. Jim's wife was the former Joan Horndorf. Gordon married Dorothy Dyer, and Tom's wife is Suzanne Ewing of Rockville, Maryland.